All right, in this video we're going to wrap up our relatively quick discussion on all of the different parameters available to us in the light mapping panel. We're going to be talking about maps. So let's go ahead and switch on over to that guy. All right, so inside our maps panel, if you will find an array showing all of the light maps that have been baked out. So right now, as Lee is kind of circling around these two textures, we know that we are currently in a deferred lighting rendering path. And by using that path, we have the ability to use dual light maps, and we're using the near and far. And we see that with the two maps there. But this array, right now the array size is 1. So let's go ahead and show them the 1. There's 1. And in slot 0, which is the only slot available for the array, we've got one slot, and that's slot 0 because it's 0 based. We have the two maps, so they work as a pair basically. But the bottom line is this right here is slot 0. So size 1, we have 1. So if we want, let's go ahead and turn that to 2 real quick. You'll see that we now have 2 slots, but again, since we're dealing with dual maps, each slot has 2 maps. And if we were dealing with just singular map, we would be seeing only 1 map for each of these slots. Now, you're seeing us adjust this array size here. Let's go ahead and take that back down to 1. Interesting thing to know. We haven't locked our atlas. So this is our atlas. By locking our atlas, Beast will not manipulate the size of this array. It won't manipulate the atlas. Unlocked is the default state, which means each time we go in and we bake out our maps, Beast is going to automatically adjust. Well, I say Beast, I'll just say Unity. Unity is going to adjust the array automatically. And let's show this by upping that array size again to 2. And then let's make sure over on bake, let's make sure we have some a very low resolution setting, maybe around 10, just so we can get something fast out of this. And maybe even just 20 final gathers, because I'm not worried about it looking pretty. Just get it relatively fast. Now let's jump over to maps.
Well, if you want to go real low, do you want to take off the global illumination?
Yeah, that works for me.
Get this thing
very nice. Even better. Let's jump back over to maps now. So you see that we have an array size of 2. Okay, so we have 2 elements in our array. So let's now go ahead and just do a bake. Yeah, make sure those lights are on. And watch what's going to happen. You're going to see our array is going to be resized automatically by Unity.
Well, actually, we're still going to end up with 2 because just the few objects that we have, it's only going to require 2 sets to do the whole scene.
Oh, that's right. It's going to require having 2. So what we're going to do is
if I can.
No, can't do it now. Hang tight.
Too slow. I was going to try to beat it.
Let's up it to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot that because of the. There we go. Objects and all. Let's do it again.
I can actually clear it, and that's going to get rid of them all.
Oh, why'd you clear it? Okay, well that'll work. Yeah, that works perfectly. I just wanted to show that it's going to be auto resized since the atlas is currently not locked.
Correct.
Okay, so this should be done relatively fast.
Yeah, the last one was only 22 seconds, so it won't take that long.
And then atlas locking will get us back into a discussion of locking out or baking selected geometry. We'll look at that in just a second, but before we get too far away from this, check it out. So the array size was automatically adjusted. Now, locking the array means we become responsible for managing the atlas. Basically, how large the array size is, and then each of our geometry pieces that will be receiving a light map, what index within the array it will be using. Right now, let's go ahead and switch over to the Object tab real quick, and let's select one of those walls. Now, you'll notice that we have an atlas section that we can open up. Let's go and open it and look inside. Look at that. We have our light map index. So it's using index 1. Now watch this. Deselect that guy. Okay, let's go back to maps real quick. So index 1, it's 0 base. So let's go to 1. Right click on 1 and select the users of that light map. These are the guys that are using index 1, that are using those maps right there. Okay, so now right click on the upper one and you can see who is using 0, and we have our sphere that is using 0. Okay,
as well as the background plane.
Yeah, as well as the background plane. Very good. So another thing just to point out, while you still have maps up, go ahead and walk over into the scene and manually select the geometry, like one of the back walls. You'll see that it's also going to auto update what map is being used over in the map panel. It should not auto update the map, but auto update that yellow highlight showing you which map's being used. Okay, so again, these maps being auto generated and the size being adjusted. Well, what happens if we don't want the size to be adjusted? And this gets into almost a controversial area if you start searching around on the internet, because if you recall in the last video I said to Lee, well, what if we just want to do a bake selected on one of these walls? And Lee said, well, it's going to delete the other ones. Think it's going to delete the other ones? Well, yeah, it's going to delete the other ones. And sure enough, it deleted the other ones. All right, well, what if we lock our atlas? It doesn't delete the other ones, but it clears them out of the array slot that those maps were in. That's very frustrating. And now, unfortunately, I have not found, and Lee has not found, any way to change that behavior in Unity without writing your own script. It'd be very easy to do. As a matter of fact, it's something we discussed for just a few seconds, about 10 minutes ago, doing sometime in the near future, maybe making a quick video showing you guys how to do it. But let's go ahead and show them first where the maps are, because I want them to see the difference between maps getting deleted and just getting removed. So these maps do indeed exist back in our scene. So Lee's now got the, what is it, the lighting?
Well, what it's doing is when you bake out light maps, it's going to take your scene name and it's going to create a folder at the same folder level that your scene is at with the same name.
Right. It's funny, from where I'm sitting, which is about 4 foot away, I have to actually lean all over the desk just to get over to the mouse. All that's blurry, and it looked like lighting text at first. And I was like, lighting text? What? Okay, that's a weird name. But up underneath this, we see 4 assets. We've got 4 light maps that are being used. And obviously, we've got 4 being used because we can see them populating our atlas, our array. Okay? So what I'd like to do is take a look at what happens if we do a bake selected on just one of the walls without locking our atlas. So this is back into what we were doing at the very end of the last video. So we have selected one of these guys, and let's go ahead and do a bake selected. Now keep an eye on the 4 materials up underneath right there. Keep an eye on those, as well as what happens here with the array. So we'll do the bake selected. Now it physically deleted 2 of those maps. So Lee was accurate in the last video when he said, well, it's going to delete it. Like, well, that's a bad thing. It did get rid of it. Now, don't let what's happening over in our scene view mess with your head right now, because we do have lights that are active. And so those lights, of course, are making it look like, well, we got light maps all over the place. Well, if we go in here and turn the lights out, so we can see it's just the one wall. So we did indeed just bake select it there. All right, let's go ahead, Lee, and bake the entire scene out real quick again. So turn the lights back on. And we'll bake the scene out. So now we shall see our array size increase to 2. And we're going to see 4 maps. So 2 new ones will appear down in the folder and in the array here, the atlas. So just about done. And here goes. Boom. So now we've got 4, and we see the 4 back over here. So now let's go ahead and jump back over to the bake panel. And then in here, what we want to do is lock our atlas. By locking the atlas, we are telling Beast we're going to manage everything. We're going to manage the atlas ourselves. This means we're going to manage our size. This means we're going to manage our light map indexes for each of our objects. Now, we're going to hit bake selected here in a second to show you an error, but I want for you guys to see something. What you thinking right there?
I'm thinking, because I don't want to lose these yet.
Well, you're not. We just locked it. Well, you're going to lose them as far as them
here.
being in the slot.
Exactly. So we're going to lose these, but we're still going to keep
exactly
the files down here.
That is what I wanted to demonstrate here.
So what I'm thinking is if we rename here, give us another set of indexes.
No.
I can keep the naming.
What I'm trying to do is I'm just demonstrating between, we're recreating the exact thing we just did, where if you select that one wall again.
Okay.
And now, make sure your lights are on.
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to do a bake selected. So the exact same thing as before, but a couple of things. Number one, so we've got this locked. So here are the two things. One, hit bake selected. Okay. Wow, man, that was amazing fast. So what's this blinding white stuff going on back over there? Now it's time to start looking at the index. So we need to take a look at the index. So if you jump back over to Object, and then you have selected, this is interesting. This guy right here was already using index number 1. So because of the map down below and the settings that were already here, that were originally placed here by the calculations that were done earlier when the atlas was being managed by Unity/Beast, these settings, well, now are wrong. So if we take our light map index for 1 and we change it to some other number, so let's go and do that, like 0, which 0 has nothing on it right now. Look at that. Nothing's there. Now you're going to find that when you bring something in, by default, what is it, 255, I think?
Well, if you have something that hasn't had a light map, it generally defaults to 255.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So, but because right now we've locked our atlases, when we're baking stuff out, everything's retaining its own index that it had before.
And that's the key thing to know here. What I was saying a second ago, you're now responsible for managing your array size, and you are responsible for managing the index of each of these objects as far as what map they're going to be using. So with that one still being on 1, but the map now being calculated completely different, we suddenly just had solid white, which was pretty interesting.
Correct.
So,
and
the final thing, real quick, sorry. Go ahead and show them down below. We still have all 4 of our light maps there. Nothing was deleted this time. But what does happen is our array. Inside of our atlas itself, all of the array elements that are not receiving any sort of map from the object that is currently being baked is cleared. And that's kind of a problem. I don't like that personally.
Right. I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't come in here, select our files, and drag them back in. And as you can see, we get all of our lighting back that we had, except for this back wall, which is kind of weird.
So let's do this. Let's take our array size up to 3.
I was going to explain what happened here.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, what had happened is, if you remember, when we had this wall selected, it was originally pointing to index 1, which was white. And then we set it to 0. Well, the index for 0 is actually the light map that's used for everything else in the scene. So what you're seeing is actually part of the light map from the ground plane and the sphere being mapped on here.
You're seeing that now.
I'm seeing
and that's
it now.
because you dragged those two textures back.
Because we changed its index to 0, and because I dragged the ones back in. So if I take this index and I set it to a number that is currently not being used, it ends up not getting a light map. So it has nothing on it, and if I come over here to our maps, we're currently not using the next index. Actually, it should be 2 because we're 0 based.
That's right.
So instead of 3.
So we'll put 2 there, and then let's go ahead. Again, we're now managing our array size. Let's take our size up to 3, so it has that element to place the maps in, okay, which is element 2, 0 based.
Right.
So now we have it selected. So what Lee's going to do is he's going to hit the bake selected. So we're going to bake the 1, and it's going to place the 2 maps in element 2 there at the bottom. So both those will get filled. But the other guys, while they're not going to be deleted, they will be cleared from the array. And that's what I personally find a little frustrating.
Well, in this case where you've only got 2 or 3 light
It's
maps,
not a big deal to drag them back.
But if you have all 254 of them populated and you have to drag them all back by hand, that would be really, really tedious after a while.
Yeah. So there you go. We've demonstrating what we were talking about. We've now got more light maps that have just appeared down below because we're now using a whole new slot. We've now got new maps for him. And those 2 maps have populated the correct index within the atlas, within the array, but the other 2 slots were emptied out.
Yeah. And we can still come back in here like we did before and take each of the appropriate maps and drag them back into our boxes and relight our scene.
Now, if you are comfortable with coding in Unity, shouldn't take a few minutes to knock out a very simple script that could automate this entire process for you.
Correct.
And get everything assigned back in. And again, we'll take a look at doing something like that. We'll see if we can squeeze something like that in very soon after we get these series we're working on right now out of the way. For those of you that are interested, because, well, I'm interested. I'm interested in having it just as a tool while working. Okay, so, all right, what else do we want to talk about?
Well, the next one is this compressed checkbox. Basically, it's just dictating whether or not these textures are going to be compressed or not. So there's not a whole lot of options in it. You can check it, it'll uncompress all your textures, or you can check it and it'll compress it. Not a whole lot of technical discussion needs to go in on that one. That's the kind that I like right there. It's either on or off. That's it. So other than that, you can lock your atlases if you want to hand control all of your light maps. This is definitely very handy if you get into very complex scenes. You've baked everything out. You then can take all of these light maps, move them into another folder so they don't accidentally get wiped out if somebody comes in, unchecks your locked atlases, and then bakes out your light maps.
Right.
It also gives you the flexibility that after this has all been done, you can keep these light maps with your project, bring them in manually by dragging them, writing scripts to bring them in. But it also opens up the possibility that you can bring in your own light maps from other sources for a different object. So if you, another piece of geometry, a mesh. Let's say you model out a building in Maya. You've got a light map for it that you've baked out previously that's going to work for your situation. You can then bring that in with its light map, give it an index number over here, and then put it into your light map array, drag those light maps in as appropriate, and be able to work with them that way.
Right.
So it can be a time saver as well.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I just wanted to spend the extra minute really kind of demonstrating the whole bake selected thing, because in the last video, it's Leah's the artist with putting levels together inside the editor, and I spend all of my time coding, and Lee's worked with this stuff quite a great deal, and it just seemed intuitive to me to say bake selected for that not to go eliminating everything else.
Oh, you should have seen how I learned it. It was wonderful. Remember those light bakes that we were talking about where you go to bed?
Yeah.
Well, I did one of those on that other scene, and I went to bed, and I got up the next day, and wow, my scene looked great. And it's like, well, the interior of this building isn't quite what I want, so I'm going to adjust these lights a little bit, move them around. But, I don't need to rebake that terrain and everything out there, so I'm just going to rebake, this interior part of the building. So I selected all the objects in the interior of that building, and I hit Bake Selected. So it's like waited a little bit, and because it was only a few, it only took about 20, 30 minutes to bake that out. It was great. Then I moved the camera outside. And all my light maps were gone.
It could have popped up a dialogue. Would be nice saying, this will delete all maps that you already have. Do you want to proceed?
It would be nice. Or even in the Unity document saying, don't use this unless you're willing to sacrifice all your other light maps. But it was definitely something that I won't forget.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Now that we've seen that, I do like the idea, of course, about copying the light maps out of that folder into another folder, because it would be very easy for an accident to occur where that atlas lock is basically disengaged, and then you accidentally do a bake, select it, and eliminate all of your maps. That would just be bad.
A way that you could do it is even inside of your prefabs folder. If you're going to be working with prefabs, you could actually come in here, create a new folder, and then just name it light maps. You can then actually take all your light maps, drag them out, and put them into this light maps folder. Now, the nice thing is the editor is smart enough to realize that you've just relocated all those light maps, so you're not going to break all the links. But what ends up happening is if you come into Lock Atlas and you do a bake selected, hopefully it's not going to go delete all those.
No, you're going to be good.
So here's our light maps.
Yep.
We've got everything we've got that we had before. We didn't lose anything, but we've got the new additional light maps.
That's right.
So, but
just in case an accident happens, because obviously you would not want to unlock it. Again, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
An accident must have occurred, because the moment you unlocked it, whatever you did to calculate the size of your array and get everything in there, that size is going to go back to whatever size it needs to be to accommodate what you've just baked.
Right, and if you've got Atlas Lock off, anything that is in this default folder that it puts in gets erased.
That's right.
So it's just a good way to protect yourself just in case.
Just be careful. Okay, so I do believe that is going to wrap up this, discussion of parameters available in light mapping, and we've taken a look at how to go about generating these light maps and using a little bit of global illumination and some of the parameters that we can fine-tune to give us, some nicer bounce, stronger, lighter. We've looked a little bit at little occlusion, some ambient occlusion, that is. So I think that's going to bring this discussion to a close, and in the next video we'll jump back to your simple level, and we'll just set up some settings real quick and then fire it off, and we'll call it on that video and let it do its half-hour bake or so.
Right.
So that's going to wrap this up, unless there's anything that you want to add?
No, that's a good covering of all the settings inside of the light mapping.
Good bit of everything anyways. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, and that wraps this one up.